Welcome to State Lobbying Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we delve into the careers and personal life stories of some of the best and the brightest state government relations experts. I'm your host, Deepak, CEO of Legistracker. Cady Thomas grew up in Edenton, North Carolina for 17 years. She was the only child, grew up with a lot of friends, and had the quintessential town life. Her family was involved in politics, but she was always interested in policy rather than politics. Her inclination to policy led her to pick political science at Sweet Briar College. Cady liked learning international government classes, but the real eye-opening class in Cady's life was when she was given 4 different country constitutions and was asked to pick a country to live in. What sparked Cady's interest in the political side of policy rather than the legal side of the policy in that specific class? Cady then started her career at the Capitol Hill, worked at the North Carolina Association of Realtors as the Director of Regulatory Affairs, and eventually as a partner at Focus Public Affairs. Let's listen in to Cady Thomas's personal story. Hi, Cady. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know I gave you a very short notice, but you said yes to it, so I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm flattered to be asked.
So let's get into it. How was your childhood? Where did you grow up? And what kind of childhood did you have?
So I grew up in Edenton, North Carolina, which is over in the very northeastern corner of the state, a very small town. It was sort of your quintessential small town life. Everybody rode bikes and played outside, and I was an only child, so I spent a lot of time with friends and was there for the first 17 years of my life. But it was good. It was a fun childhood. I have wonderful parents that some of my best friends probably, and they are just still really close to me to this day.
So your schooling, were you active in politics, or were you interested in politics at all back then?
So it's kind of funny. I did run for student body treasurer in high school. And so I was the treasurer of our senior class, but I also did put on the prom. I was a prom co-chairperson and played tennis. And so sort of all over the place in my extracurricular activities. I was in the choir and did the musicals and things like that at school.
Nice. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Oh, no. So I didn't spend a lot of time on the politics side, but I was always very interested in politics and policy. So
interesting. So what kind of, as a treasurer of student body, what was your role there?
There really wasn't one, because being a public high school, the high school really maintained any student finances, but it was really just to get us to do little fundraisers to help pay for the senior prom. It was more of a fundraising role than an actual treasurer's role.
That's good. So after high school, what made you pick political science?
Well, I always liked it. My family's always been very involved in sort of politics, and I liked policy better than politics. So knew that I wanted to get into some sort of legal field that had more of a policy background. And so just when I went to Sweet Briar, government was the way that they termed poli-sci. I was a government major, and my very first intro to politics or intro to government, my professor was wonderful, and he helped me maintain my enthusiasm for the subject matter.
Okay. Can you remember any specific course or any specific interest you had back then? Can you think of anything which you said like, oh, okay, this was something which was really interesting to me?
When we did, I remember one of our sort of eye-opening lessons one day, we went into class and a professor gave us 4 different constitutions for 4 different countries and said, in which country would you want to live? And we all picked Iran because their constitution seemed so fair, but they didn't really abide by their constitution. So when he told us which ones belonged to which countries, we all looked and we all probably would have chosen England or the United Kingdom, but theirs was sort of the least prescriptive. And it was very eye-opening to me to understand that just because it's in a constitution doesn't mean that it's going to be followed, and there have to be the checks and balances and the other systems that make sure that your constitution is followed and that you're operating under a very legal system. And that really got me excited about more of the political side of policy versus the legal side of policy. And that's how I ended up then wanting to go to Capitol Hill after graduating from college, was because I gained a better appreciation for our actual political system through that sort of lecture, and then grew on that. And I ended up taking a lot of international government classes as well, because I wanted to learn more about how other countries, how their systems work, not necessarily their policies, but more how they operate on a day-to-day level and how they purport to help their people or run their countries.
Interesting. And this was all in the political science major?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And anything which you can think distinctly as far as like other countries go? Like how are they different than the United States?
I think it just runs the gamut. And I ended up refocusing when I went to law school. I thought I wanted to do international affairs, and I interned for the Foreign Relations Committee, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, one summer. And once I got into the sort of legal process of what I thought I wanted to do, there was not as much to it right off the bat that I felt like I could really make the difference that I thought I was going to. And unless I went back into policy side of things versus the legal side of things. And so, but what I really fell in love with was more the interactions with our own government and foreign entities, foreign countries. One of my roles when I was working on Capitol Hill, I assisted with foreign adoptions through the senator's office that I worked for. And so that was always very exciting and mostly happy circumstances, things of that nature that I got to learn more from the day to day versus kind of a long legal proceedings and that kind of thing. It was more immediate responsiveness and results.
Okay. And when you said you worked at the Capitol Hill, was that like an internship during the political science degree you were getting?
So during my undergraduate, I did work for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee the summer before my senior year. And then after graduation, I went and worked for a U.S. senator for 2 years prior to going to law school.
Oh, okay. And how did you get that position?
The way anybody on Capitol Hill gets a position, I knew somebody who knew somebody who was able to make some phone calls.
Okay. So it's all networking, right?
It's all networking.
Right. So, I mean, looking back, I know you said like after you graduated, you got those 2 years of experience. Would you recommend someone who wants to get into lobbying do some sort of a position like that to get into this?
Not necessarily. I think at 18, if you want to do, you're rare, right? So at 21, 22, knowing what you want to do is also very rare unless committed to something like a law degree or a medical degree or something of that nature. So really it's about finding what you like. And so if you think you want to get into lobbying or policy work, yes, definitely do internships in that realm. If you think you want to go to law school, try to get an internship with a law firm, or even go be a paralegal in a law firm for a year or a case assistant. I think that's the best advice I could give somebody considering law school, is to go work in one for a year and really see if it's what you want to do.
Okay. So what were your responsibilities as a legislative correspondent?
So that's when I was working for the U.S. Senator, and I was helping with the foreign adoptions and those processes. I was working with legislative directors of specific policy and issue types. So I would work with them on responses to constituent inquiries, research for them on different issues as they came up on Capitol Hill, as bills were introduced, things of that nature, so that they could then advise the senator on the issues and the policy around the issues and those sort of things. A lot of constituent services, though, a lot of responding to constituents. One of the biggest issues that hit North Carolina while I was up there was Hurricane Floyd. That was recent. Hurricane Isabel. And Floyd was the most recent, really, really devastating one. But Hurricane Isabel hit, and it happened to hit my hometown particularly hard. But in the days leading up to it, because I covered OSHA and FEMA for the office, I was in all of the briefings about the prep work and all of that. And then it was happening. And after it happened, I was in all of the briefings on what happens next. And so I got to be on a lot of phone calls with my senator, the other senator from North Carolina, the two senators from South Carolina, and the vice president, many calls about aftermath and what we were going to ask for from Congress as way of relief packages. And all of that was really sad. It was a really hard time for this state, but it was also it was wonderful to see people of different parties and different branches and different bodies of government pull together to help people who were in such need.
Okay. So at what point during this position you held, did you feel like, I need to get a law degree?
So I'd always wanted to go to law school. I was one of those weird people that did know at 18 I wanted to go to law school. I just always changed what I was going to law school for, what I wanted to be when I grew up. But most of the things I wanted to be in life, I thought would require a law degree. And so lobbying was actually never anything I thought of. In getting the law degree, I always thought I would practice law. And I did for a little while. But I had always planned to just be on the Hill 2 to 3 years and then go back to law school, because I wanted to get it out of the way while I still was in that study mode from school.
Oh, okay. So looking back at your law degree, can you think of any course which has particularly helped you?
So the one that changed my path was my first semester property law class. And I really just sort of clicked with that. And that ended up changing my whole perspective on what I was going to do. So I ended up doing the joint MBA degree at the same time and did my concentration there in real estate finance, and took as many property classes as Washington College of Law offered. And then went in, and I thought I would end up working in-house for some big construction firm or, developer or something of that nature. That was sort of my ultimate goal, was to do that when I first started.
Oh, interesting.
I went completely away from the government side of things altogether.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the American University, right? Where is this?
In DC.
Oh, so you've moved when you said you applied for the Capitol Hill, so you moved to DC, and that's where you continued living there?
I continued, yes. I was there for a little over 6 years total.
Oh, interesting. So after you got this, so this was, you said, the real estate management finance. Is that what you were in?
Finance, the MBA.
Okay. So what does it involve?
It was just more of the accounting and the economics of development. And, we had other courses we had to take as well, just as part of the degree. But for the concentration, it revolved a lot around statistics, economic, and then accounting, a lot of accounting.
Oh, okay. So you got both the degrees, the law degree and the MBA. Holy moly. Okay. That is something else. So what happened after you got the MBA at 2004?
So then I came back to North Carolina, and I took a job with a law firm in Raleigh, and I took a position within their capital markets group. So I was working primarily for banks who had large loan portfolios on commercial properties that they sell off into secured mortgages. And so when a transaction would take place involving one of these properties, if it was sold, we would have to go through a loan assumption process, because you couldn't take it out of package because you had investors of that package. So it couldn't be paid off and then a new mortgage obtained. You had to maintain that same mortgage. So I did a lot of transaction. It was very transactional, but the properties were all over the country. So it was kind of fun to read deeds from Texas and Arizona and Washington and just
Mm.
as well as North Carolina. So,
Oh, okay. So you did this for like 3 years. Can you think of any project or any part of a solution you came up with which was pretty much useful for you in your lobbying career?
so all of it has been useful. I mean, being able to read for detail, because you have to read bills for detail, being organized, understanding the underlying issues of loans and transactions. But after about a year and a half, I actually switched practice groups because there were some changes at the firm where the partner and the senior associate both left North Carolina because their husbands got jobs elsewhere.
Mhm.
And so it left, I was in my second year as an attorney, and they told me I had to either move to Atlanta or Charlotte in order to stay with the practice group. And I just bought a house. I was happy in Raleigh. I wanted to be in Raleigh. So there was a position open in the corporate group. And so I actually switched and I went over and did mergers and acquisitions and private equity and venture capital deals for the second year and a half of that stint. And there's a lot more due diligence that happens. And so a lot more making charts and keeping lists and things that are very helpful in my day-to-day life of being a lobbyist and knowing, especially when you've got more than one client, what bill is where and what your tasks are for the day, what your assignments are for the day, so or the week.
Interesting. So all of this was revolving around real estate. Is that what you would say?
It was the first, but then that second part was really, it revolved around anything. I mean, the transactions we did involved oil companies buying out other oil companies, sanitation companies, the Butterball turkey plant, or Butterball turkey brand being bought by Smithfield Foods. So it was all over the place, you know.
Okay. So after that, what happened? It looks like you moved to the North Carolina Association of Realtors. How
I
did you get that
did.
position, and talk us through it?
Yeah. So while I was at the law firm, I did a pro bono project where I helped change juvenile justice law. I had a client who was a young woman, a minor, who very first offense, she stole something minor from a grocery store. And when they were taking her into court, they used to chain or shackle the big shackles, juvenile defendants together. But she had been the victim of sexual assault where she was chained to a radiator. And when the police officer or the sheriff went to put the chains on her, she acted out. So what went from a very small shoplifting charge then went to assaulting a police officer for a 14-year-old who had never been in trouble before. And what her legal aid attorneys realized was maybe it wasn't right to shackle children together without cause, because you can't do that to adults. You have to prove that they are such a flight risk or such a danger that it warrant that type of restriction. And so we changed the juvenile code to match. And that was so fulfilling, and it got me down to the General Assembly, North Carolina General Assembly, a place I had never been before. And it was so different than Capitol Hill. It was so open and people were so friendly, and you could just walk in and see elected officials without appointments, and they would talk to you in the hallway. It was a much different place than Capitol Hill. And I realized that I really did enjoy that time, and I felt like I had done something, made a difference. And so I spent the next year and a half trying to find, maybe not quite that long, but the next year, trying to find a position. And the position with the Realtors was open, but it was a very busy legislative year for them. So I sent in my application. I didn't hear anything. So I called a friend who worked on the political side of things. He runs campaigns. And so I called him, and he sent in my resume. And then I gave my resume to another friend who was from Junior League, but she was a lobbyist. So she sent in my resume. And then when I still hadn't heard anything after a couple of months, one of my other friends sent it to somebody who had worked for the Realtors, and she sent it in and said, I don't know this person, but if so-and-so speaks for her, she's got to be good. So finally, the person who was running the government affairs doing the lobbying at the time, he called me and he said, well, you don't have much experience, but you know enough people. I felt like I needed to talk to you. So I tell people I lobbied to get my job lobbying. And it's networking. It was all about networking and figuring out how best to get to someone to get what I ultimately wanted, which it was a perfect fit because I had the real estate background. I understood the issues. I understood the terminology, which certain industries can be tricky. I'd estate's not as tricky as, say, the medical industry, but I didn't have a steep learning curve on the issue side of things. And I had done a little bit of lobbying, but I had to get kind of the rest of it, the relationships, building the relationships of the building and that sort of thing. And so I started by doing mostly their regulatory affairs and working with the real estate commission and the appraisal board. But yeah, that's how I ended up there. Just kept calling, kept harassing, kept pushing my way in.
Excellent. So looking back at your college life and your degree, sorry, I forgot to ask this question. Would you recommend anyone who is at the crossroads, who's thinking of getting a law degree, would you recommend that they get a law degree before they get into lobbying?
It's totally not necessary. It helps. It 100% helps me on a day-to-day basis. And I probably would not have gotten the job with the Realtors if I hadn't been an attorney, because they were looking for an attorney to do the regulatory work. And regulatory does tend to be much more, a little more in depth and a little more, the legal background helps you out a great deal in that scenario. But it's not necessary. My business partner is not a lawyer. There are lots of people in that building who are not lawyers, and they do just as well as anybody else. So it's definitely not a must, but it does help. It helps me a great deal, and I think clients really like it as well.
Okay, that's good to know. So back at the North Carolina Association of Realtors, can you walk us through what kind of responsibilities did you primarily have?
So those first 2 years, I was mainly responsible for responding to, monitoring, working with the boards and commissions that affect the real estate industry. So the Real Estate Commission Appraisal Board, Home Inspector Licensure Board, Department of Insurance, those types of entities. And after 2 years, and then I would do some lobbying. I'd be sort of the second lobbyist in the building when things heated up or there was an issue we needed to work on. But my primary role was not in the building. Then after 2 years, the gentleman that hired me, he took a new job and they promoted me. And so that's when my role became much bigger. Not only was I now lobbying full time, but I was also overseeing the political action committee, our grassroots networking function and arm, our independent expenditures arm. So I was overseeing the political as well as the policy. And that's whenever I really started to grow into a better, more well-rounded government affairs person, because I was starting to understand all that's involved in today's world of advocacy.
Mm-hmm. So for a layman just like me, can you just explain what does the North Carolina Association of Realtors do?
So they advocate for property right for all North Carolinians. They want to have available and affordable housing in all price ranges. They want to make sure that people who want to own property can own property, and people that want to rent have safe rental, safe situations like that. And then that landlords are treated fairly, just like tenants are treated fairly. But they really are advocating for the private use and enjoyment of property, whether it's commercial, residential, industrial. So we run the gamut.
So, I mean, if I had to take one step deeper in this, so can you explain, let's say if I'm a private owner, like house owner, and do I have to come to you and say hey, I would like to make some modifications to the existing law. Can you help me with it? Is that how it goes through, or there's a chain which I have to follow?
No, so really we have membership. So most of our legislative requests come from members who are brokers, real estate brokers, but they're getting ideas from their clients who are the homeowners, right? They're dealing every day with buyers and sellers of residential or commercial properties. they're seeing the obstacles that are out there. They're the zoning obstacles or the exorbitant hookup fees or and so we get our ideas through the brokers who are out there in the field working with the homeowners. We do on occasion have homeowners or members of the general public that will reach out with an issue because they're looking for some sort of solution. They're not necessarily asking us for a legislative change, but they will call and say, this is what's happening right now, and I don't feel like it's fair. How can I help solve it? Or I'm not sure where to turn. And so we do help in those situations. And in some cases, it turns into, well, maybe this does need a legislative fix. Most times it's not. Most times we can direct them to the right agencies or local government entities to help them with their issues. But sometimes it'll rise up.
Okay, got it.
To that level.
Okay, so on those lines, can you think of any challenging projects or policy you worked on during your stint at the North Carolina Association of Realtors?
There were lots. So everything involves real estate. And so anything you can imagine we've probably dealt with, but tax reform was a really big issue. Really think about tax reform being something that the realtors might be heavily engaged in, but there are many areas of our tax code which are beneficial to real estate, like the mortgage interest and property tax deductions. And they really help people obtain property in the state. So that was a really big, because it was such an overarching change and there were so many entities and people and stakeholders involved, that it is probably one people don't think about as much, but we were very engaged in that. Likewise, just as engaged in that as we were in getting the ability for independent contractors to participate in association healthcare plans in North Carolina. Because real estate brokers are, for the most part, independent contractors, which means they don't have the ability to buy into any group programs other than the ACA. And over the last couple of years, we've seen the costs in the ACA raise dramatically. And so we had about 14% of the North Carolina realtors who were uninsured. And it's not a good thing to have an uninsured membership base. So we worked very hard and spearheaded an effort to allow independent contractors to use association healthcare plans in North Carolina.
Okay.
So things you don't necessarily think about, but had huge impacts.
Okay. And can you tell us, what skills did you gain from your 10 years of experience there?
Yes, a lot. But mostly management skills, because it was the first time I had ever been a manager. And in the 8 years that I ran the department, we grew from 3.5 employees to 11 employees. And so we really built out a local government affairs program with some of the local boards. We stepped up our consumer facing side of things. So it was really a big jump. We increased our fundraising triple in that time because we just got the right people. It was wonderful, but managing is hard. And that's what I learned. Managing is hard. It's fulfilling and rewarding. But at the end of the day, I was not doing very much lobbying, and that's what I wanted to do. And so worked it out. I'm very, very fortunate to have worked it out where I'm still their chief lobbyist, but I don't have to manage the people anymore.
I hear you. So what happened in 2018? You said you wanted to be doing the lobbying piece of it. That's why you started your own firm. Is that what you did? Okay.
Yes. So I joined with one other business partner and
Wendy.
Now service a number of clients and I get to still maintain a very close relationship with the realtors and be very engaged in their efforts and still very connected with the people there and the membership base, which is important to me. But I also get to lobby and not have to worry about budgets and is everyone there? Did they show up for work today? Or why are they fighting with each other? Are they growing as staff members? Are they fulfilled with their jobs? I mean, there was a lot to it that you don't think about in the beginning.
Yeah, I understand. So talk us through your current position, like as a partner at Focus Public Affairs. What kind of clientele do you have, and do you focus primarily on the real estate, or are you like across the board? Can you talk us through it?
So we're really across the board. We have a number of different clients in all different industries. So we have everything from education and transportation to real estate to small engineering firm, North Carolina, South Carolina based engineering firms. So we have a really good mix of clients that we work with. So it does get us the ability to kind of be in all areas. Now, sometimes that's hard because you've got to be in a lot of committees at once, but it definitely gives you the ability to learn and learn new subject matters, learn new industries, learn new areas of businesses, things of that nature. So we've really had the ability to branch out. And I would say I tend to focus more on the finance and tax side of things, insurance policies, regulations, that sort of thing. And my business partner focuses more on the healthcare and the education side.
Okay. So what have you learned from your experience here with your own firm? And is there anything which you never thought, oh, okay, I didn't know this piece, which with all my experience, which you have had before, anything which felt like, oh, this is something new that you learned?
So really it's the client relationship and understanding which clients need what kind of communication, how, I went from having a scenario I was very used to, and I understood how my boss liked to be communicated with, and we had a set structure on how we communicated with the public or with the membership. So I didn't have to think about it too much. And now it's making sure that our clients feel like they are getting the information they need even when we're not in session. So things that we're staying well aware and on top of whatever's happening during the interim, but also maintaining that client relationship, that personal touch.
Okay. And are you primarily in North Carolina? Your clients are all based here, or are they across?
Our
USA?
clients are kind of based everywhere, but we only really lobby in North Carolina.
Okay. And how do you typically get your clients? Is it through referrals, or how do you do it?
Referrals is the best way. So every once in a while, somebody will just be searching for a North Carolina lobbyist and they'll come across the firm, but really it's referrals.
Okay. And do you want to highlight any of the most recent policies you worked on for any of your clients, which you're really particularly proud of?
So the Association Health Plans legislation in 19, very proud of that. That was a big effort with a lot of stakeholders that really took a lot of time, and I'm not the medical person, so it took a lot of education on my part as well. But I know that if we can get through now some federal legal battles that we're snarled in, but if we can get through that, that's really going to make a difference in people's lives. And that's the good feeling that I like having.
Yeah.
That really could be game changers for people. And that is important. Another big policy issue for one of our clients was a tax issue also in 2019 that we worked on getting an extension of a tax credit for American Airlines for jet fuel sales tax, which right now the airline industry is taking a huge hit and they're not flying as much. But when they were flying, we were getting a lot of the benefit of not having to pay that, the airlines not having to pay that sales tax. We were seeing more airlines actually book flights through North Carolina because they could fuel here, and it was such a cost-saving measure for them. So probably more important now to have the cost savings, but back then it was. But it's a great way to bring more business to the state as well.
Okay. So I think those were the major pieces of questions I had for you. Now you can take some time to, if you want to talk anything about yourself, or if you felt that I didn't ask you some important questions, you have the floor. You can talk about yourself or about your company as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that for me, it's just, this is something I really enjoy doing. I sometimes miss the management part. I miss having some of those mentees, but and watching them grow and succeed and move on to really great jobs. I do miss that a little bit, but this really is what I like to do. I mean, I enjoy the lobbying. I enjoy the nature of it, the social nature of it. It's been really hard in the COVID times. I'm somebody who, when they're in session, I'm generally at the building whenever they are in session. And I think I stepped foot in that building 3 times this year, once COVID hit. And that to me is a little surreal and unnerving.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the getting to know people and building relationships. And so it's definitely an exciting job for me and one that I really like. Sometimes I'm lucky to have a job I like so much.
That's awesome. So if you had to give one piece of advice to anyone who wants to get into lobbying, what would it be?
Network. Just make sure people know what you want to do, because everybody knows somebody in a government position. They might not know a lobbyist, but they know somebody that's working somewhere that knows a lobbyist. And I would say that when working with the Realtors, I had a counterpart in every state, and I would tell them about the sort of lobbying community in North Carolina, and they would be floored that we might not agree on, we might have opposing clients, but yet we were still nice, and we would share information, and it's a good environment, very friendly environment. And so we're all willing to help each other out. And I think everybody that I know has coffees with, or used to have coffees with, now we have Zooms with, folks who are looking to get into the industry, because that's what we all did. We all sat down and had coffee with as many people as we could think of. And so we are happy to have those conversations. Just know we don't necessarily have a job for you, but we'll have the conversation. And it's best when we know you're looking, because we tend to hear what's coming open before the rest of the world, right? Because who's gotten a new job somewhere, so well, their position's going to have to be filled. So, so it's network, and don't be afraid to ask somebody for a 15-20 minute conversation.
Okay, perfect piece of advice. With that, I think we are now to the rapid fire questions part. If you're all set, I'll fire away.
Okay.
What is the one myth about lobbying you would like to bust?
That I'm taking everyone out to dinner and that it is a nonstop party. I can't even give someone a piece of gum, so I'm not whining and dining legislators.
Excellent. What are the 3 skills you think are essential for someone to be a good lobbyist?
So you've got to pay attention and listen. You have to have enough of an understanding of your issues and be willing to put the work in to understand your issues. And then just being a hard worker and being able to go and talk and not take no personally. It's about an issue. It's not about you.
What would you be if you weren't a lobbyist?
I would love to say I'd be an actress, but I'd probably be a veterinarian.
What is your favorite book or hobby?
My favorite hobby right now is crocheting.
Okay.
I apparently became a very old woman during COVID times and took up crocheting. So I definitely have been enjoying that. But I've also been reading some, and so I've really found Killing Lincoln very fascinating. So I think I'm going to go back and read that series of books, because it was the historical perspectives and stories were things you never learned who John Wilkes Booth really was and what he was up to and who his conspirators, what their lives were. So it was very interesting to really delve into more and get a better sense. I feel like I'll remember the whole timeline better.
Do you have any role models in your life?
Oh, I have a lot of role models. I think you have role models for different reasons, and you have mentors, a lot of different mentors. And I think even folks who are no longer with us can maintain the sense of being a role model, and I think they're role models because they have certain attributes. And so I'd love to be as strong and confident and maybe not quite as forceful, but almost as forceful as a Margaret Thatcher, but as kind and loving and welcoming as my grandmother. And so if there were barriers I thought I could break, like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I wish I had thought of them or knew what they were and had those ambitions. So always just striving to be better than you are and looking to people who are better and who've achieved a lot and working towards being that better person.
Excellent. What inspires or motivates you to be doing what you're doing?
I just really like it. I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd at heart. I love when a new issue comes up and just trying to figure out the problem and how to solve it. And I think the clients, though, also motivate you because you're working hard for people who really believe in what they need or their roles or their jobs. And so that makes it fulfilling as well.
Well said. With that, I will conclude the podcast, and thank you so much for being on the show, Cady. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It was fun learning about Cady's journey into lobbying. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show and your support. Take care until next time.